It's not the house that's haunted. It's your son.
What's your favorite scary movie?
What's the boogeyman?
As a matter of fact, it was.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Slashers in Sync. Always good to be with you guys on this Tuesday morning. Today's episode is going to be pretty interesting because we're going to be talking about Sidney versus Freddy Krueger. But not what you imagine. This isn't going to be like a straight versus battle like previous topics on our channel, more specifically with the Michael Myers versus Jason Voorhees. And we will talk more about that type of stuff later. In future episodes. We also have another cross-verse episode that should be coming out in the next month or two. It's going to be pretty supernatural, and that's all I have to say about it. But regardless of that, this should be a fun time. And joining me, as always, is the lovely, the smartest, most attractive woman on the planet, Marvelous.
That's every single time. Every single time your intros are insane. No, but thank you. No, I'm just gonna say that much.
All that matters is that I think so, because my opinion is better than everyone else's.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm just kidding. I'm not that egotistical.
Definitely sense the sarcasm in my voice, or at least I hope you guys did.
So these topics might become a little bit more apparent on the channel, and that's what's cool about horror, is because we have so many movies to run through, we have so many TV shows to run through. This is gonna be something that we can talk about for probably the next 5 years, straight up.
It's years to come for sure, because
we also have more stuff coming out while we're still trying to tackle the older stuff. But even on top of that, we have topics like this: Sidney versus Freddy Krueger. Now, I don't know if we're gonna title this a little bit different for the podcast episode, just because if you see this, you're probably thinking to yourself well, okay, I mean, shouldn't it be more like Hellraiser or somebody like that versus Freddy Krueger? But the topic itself isn't as, I guess, clean cut as can Sidney beat up Freddy Krueger? No. It's more so, how can Freddy Krueger fit into the universe of Scream, or how can Sidney fit into the universe of Nightmare on Elm Street? It's going to be a very fun discussion. And Marva, you specifically wanted to talk about just the first films of each respective universe, right?
Main reason behind it being that there's so many intricate details that are added to these movies with their sequels and movies that continue on, that makes the original storyline, I don't want to say convoluted, but definitely not as clean cut. So instead of you and me sitting down and having to factor in movie 2, movie 3, movie 5, movie 8, movie 9 of, be it Scream or Nightmare on Elm Street, I'd rather keep it concise to just the first films. Plus, I feel like both with the first film of Nightmare on Elm Street and the first film of Scream, Wes Craven had the most creative calls than any other movie out there. He was fully in control. Sure, he was in control of the later movies, but this was just unfiltered Wes Craven, if you will.
And to just give quick examples of what Marva's talking about, in case y'all aren't following along too well with us, is an example being movie 3 introduces the Dream Warriors in the Nightmare on Elm Street. We don't want to start talking about if Sidney is a Dream Warrior, or it gets a little too much. And then also, we talked about this in a recent podcast, which was the Roman situation and the Scream films, because later and throughout the storyline, we find out in Scream 3 that Roman's always been around. And a lot of fans have even gone up and beyond to point out certain scenes in the first Scream film where someone is wearing the Ghostface outfit, and it's obviously not Billy and Stu, because we know where they're at in the storyline. And obviously you could just say, hey, it's a kid, it's a teenager trying to scare them.
Fanboy or fangirl.
Yeah, people have made it apparent that this is an easy costume to get. That's fine. But a lot of people have gone out of the way to say, no, it actually might have been Roman that was there. And we're not trying to involve Roman in this story. So it's keeping it very simple to just what the original films were and not what came out later, like Marva said. But I guess if you want to run down the first instance of how this could go, I'll let you do that.
The first kind of twist, because just like how MJ said, I didn't think I wanted to sit back and just do like, okay, well, Sidney, like a final girl versus an antagonist. And what if like we threw them together in the same room, who would win? When I think of like Sidney versus Freddy or like Freddy Krueger, I always go into different scenarios and different what ifs and like different, I guess, moments that could encapsulate the two of them fighting each other, if you will. So the first one is probably the most basic one, which is what if Freddy replaced the main antagonist of the Scream movies, Ghostface, who are played by, at least in movie one, only by Billy and Stu.
Right.
So instead of Sidney being hunted down by the child of the man that her mom had an affair with, Sidney is now being chased by this dream demon, if you will.
I like that you call him that. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I feel like they've said it in the franchise. It's just I can't remember when.
Yeah.
So Dream Demon has like a cool ring to it.
Yeah. And I mean, let's be real. No matter how many times you kill him or outsmart him, he always comes back. I mean,
right.
Like at least in the first movie, within the first, I guess, nightmares that these kids have, be it with Nancy or with the other kids.
Yeah.
Or no matter how many times they think they've outsmarted him, it's not fully until Nancy comes to and like thinks of that final plan that she does. But circling back to Sidney versus Freddy, I think it would be an interesting square off between the two.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm literally replacing Ghostface with Freddy Krueger, it's going to be a little difficult because Freddy doesn't fully materialize into the physical world unless he's actually pulled out of the dream state. So I guess a lot of these back and forths are going to happen while Sidney's asleep. And long story short, I feel the two of them would have very interesting altercations. In my mind, if I'm thinking of Sidney in movie one, she's very easy to accuse of people, but not only that, she's more weak-minded than other Scream movies I've seen.
Yeah.
I know some people like to argue that movie 2, she's even more weak. In movie 3, she's probably at her lowest point because she isolates herself. But I feel like with movie 1, she very much plays into that victim mentality herself.
Right.
It's not just the outside, like there's no outside narrative. The only narrative that exists is in her head. And that narrative seems to be like trumping everything. I don't know, and I can't confidently say that Sidney would for sure outsmart Freddy, at least not until the very end. But I do know for a fact that Sidney does seem to like pull through for call of action. I want to say like probably the first interaction between Freddy and Sidney would probably involve like Freddy throwing in how Maureen really wasn't as like pure as Sidney remembers, or all the different signs that Sidney missed that could have led to her, like, I guess, neglecting the fact that her mother went around and slept around in town.
Which, by the way, are we saying that Maureen's dead in this instance since Ghostface doesn't exist yet, or doesn't exist in this universe since? Or do you still think Billy and Stu would have killed her a year prior?
I think they still would have killed her a year prior.
It's just Billy and Stu aren't doing
the main antagonist.
Yeah, they're not doing the.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like I would say they killed her. They didn't get the getup, at least from what I know, until movie 1. Whenever we first see Ghostface kill Casey.
Okay.
But I guess going back to the whole story, I could definitely see Freddy not only targeting Sidney but targeting her line of friends. So tying in Billy and Stu. How would Freddy interact with Billy? How would Freddy interact with Stu? Would he be able to read their minds? Like, can he make nightmares come true from the thoughts that they have? Like, and would Freddy take pleasure in tormenting these twisted fucks, if you will?
Right.
Same with Tatum. With these kind of dreams too, at least in the very beginning of movie 1, Freddy doesn't necessarily make it apparent that he's the one controlling the dreams. It's almost like certain situations are unfolding in like the wildest ways, and around the end, that's whenever Freddy makes it apparent that he's the one who's controlling the dream. The kids aren't living through it. So let's say Maureen is dead. Sidney has her first interaction with Freddy while she's asleep, and it's just Maureen's voice just echoing through saying, like, you're going to follow in my footsteps. Like, how could you not see the signs? Like, you're at fault. Don't worry. Like, you're going to go ahead and join me. Or
Freddy
like,
could even materialize her too. So like, it's actually Maureen talking to.
And it could
Sidney,
be Maureen, like, who could be a corpse, just like how Nancy's friend was in the body bag. Right?
Exactly, yeah.
Or with Billy and Stu, like the two of them are having thoughts about killing their friends. What if the nightmare is that their friends are actually thinking about killing them? What if it's Maureen who comes back from the dead? What if it's Cotton who got busts out of jail? What if it's, I don't know, like Ghostface, but it's not them who kills them, right? Because I'm sure that Billy and Stu have thought of getting into some sort of get-up to kill the rest of their friends and the people that affected their lives so much, but we don't know when they finalize on the Ghostface masks and like get up, if you will. Or Tatum.
Right.
Tatum seems to be the most like worried about Sidney. So what if her nightmare is the fact that Sidney turns and like calls her useless, a bitch, so on and controlling, so on and so forth. They're Dewey. Dewey becomes a laughing stock, right? These are all these different variables that I feel like Freddy would target this main group within the first movie, at least, and how they react and interact with these dreams would be very interesting to watch unfold. Like, I imagine Dewey just kind of screaming and being his goofy ass self, at least with movie one.
Yeah.
Billy and Stu would have different reactions. I feel like Billy would flip the fuck out because, like you mentioned earlier, he seems very much like a person who focuses on control. And if he can't control something, even if it's within his dream, I feel like he could break psychologically.
I said this off air.
Yeah.
Yeah. Y'all are not going crazy.
Stu, I feel like, would probably sit back and enjoy the ride until it didn't necessarily be the best of rides, and then that's whenever he would start to panic. Sidney, I feel like I don't think she would get killed during the first dream instance, because it seems like as if Freddy not only needs to feed off of the fear, but likes really getting his target petrified.
Yeah, he doesn't kill right away. That's even in the first movie. He always shows up like at least a few instances before he actually does kill them. Yeah.
So I feel like if Sidney can crack the code that, hey, these aren't just nightmares that she's living through, these nightmares can literally come true, then I won't say like she'll for sure one up Freddy easily or quickly, because God knows. But I do feel like her interactions with Freddy would become more intricate. Like if Freddy keeps going down the route of making Maureen like materialize in her dream, what if Maureen's the ones who's trying to like kill her or get the better of her, or her father, or even Billy, right? Freddy gets a whiff of the fact that Billy wants to kill her. What if Freddy uses it to his advantage and actually spooks the living shit out of her? And then Sidney becomes more isolated, pulls back. Like, she's very quick to blame people in this movie. She's constantly pointing fingers. And Ghostface, like, laughs at her because of it. I could definitely see Freddy doing the same thing.
Freddy movies always have, like, at least two big twists. And the first movie, the big twist is that that Freddy is, like, a dream killer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's that. The second one, which ties into Freddy, is the fact that the parents were in on it the whole time because they knew who he was, because he was a regular dude that they torched years prior when he was kidnapping and killing kids. Yeah. So in this movie, I can definitely see the twist being that Billy and Stu killed Maureen. Yeah. And that would be the, like, what Freddy is constantly hanging over Sidney, and you don't know why he keeps bringing her up and why. Obviously the quick reason is because he just wants to torture Sidney, but the other reason is because he knows a little something. A little birdie told him that, you know, Sidney doesn't know, and he kind of uses that over Sidney throughout the whole movie until we find out why. Because if I remember correctly, they do this a lot in movie 3 and onward, but in movie 1 you can have, even though it may not be the actual kids that are in the dreams, Freddy himself will, like, take the form of the kids in the, you know, and put them in the dream. An example being like when he has Glenn kind of with Nancy. Yeah. And they're going to go check on their friend who's in the jail cell. And then you find out it's not really Glenn that's with. Yeah. You know, it turns into like a bag of snakes or something like that. So I can definitely see Freddy putting Billy in the dream and having Billy just a very similar confession of what happened in Scream 1 happening here, where that famous line of like, your mother was fucking my father and I had to, you know, and that drove my mom away, you know. So I can definitely see Freddy making So materialize some fake Billy to tell that to Sidney, and that would just fuck Sidney all up.
Yeah.
My question to you, though, is, and I'll answer it first since I know I've let you talk for a minute now to give you a break there. But my question to you and to the audience would be, do you even think Sidney's mentally strong enough to handle someone like Freddy? And I'll answer with this. I told you this off air. Now, I know we said that we would keep the other movies out of this, and we're still going to do that. However, I'm going to take a little nod from them, and that is the fact that in the later editions of the film, they kind of make it known that Sidney, in, I guess, main girl fashion, right? Main protagonist aura, that Sidney was always destined to do this, and that she has like a warrior mentality.
Mm-hmm.
So I would go on the limb and say, could she beat Freddy? I don't know. We'll figure that out in a second. But could she take on someone like Freddy? Even though she does play the victim card a lot early on in this movie, I think what we see happen in Scream 1 towards the end, she is able to take a hold of that anger and she can kind of flip the table. So I can see her at least putting up a fight against Freddy narratively towards the end, like a regular main girl would. Now, could she beat him? I don't know. But what are your thoughts?
I feel like it depends. And reason behind it is like, I guess, when Freddy decides to strike. And
Against Sidney?
Yeah, and when Sidney catches on. I'm sure she would catch on after the second or third dream of like Maureen standing there stabbed up, or like Billy standing there and saying some wild ass shit. Is she isolated? Is she not? Is she still hanging out with Tatum? Is she not? These are a lot of factors that in there, but at the end of the day, I can't deny that Sidney really checks off a lot of this like final girl factors. So she could put up a really good fight. As far as like defeating him, I feel like she would need to collaborate with others to then come up with a plan to pull him from the dream world and into the physical world, or at least in Woodsboro.
That's a very smart fucking point, because Freddy doesn't pick at random. He picks with a purpose.
Yeah.
He would go after Tatum quickly to hit Sidney, because he did that to the blonde girl in the first film. Mm-hmm. She was kind of like the middle ground for the friend group, because Glenn and Nancy, I don't even think really liked, I said Roy, or I forget the guy, Rob. Yeah. They didn't really like him, but she was like the middle ground for them, and then he took her out, and then he starts to break up the friend group there, you know? So I think that's a smart point.
Yeah. So. Because I really don't feel like she would be able to take it on herself, not just because of Freddy, but also her mental state as well.
Right.
I feel like if she had a good support system, then she would for sure triumph over him.
Yeah.
But as far as like where the route goes and whether or not Tatum is targeted first, like how you mentioned, that would determine how quickly Sidney catches on and if she's even able to catch on.
Right.
So I guess long story short, yes, but I can't say confidently yes.
Does that also lead into the next question of like, can she beat him? We want to say yes, but not confidently yes. Like that would, I think those kind of go hand in hand, because if he goes after Tatum and Tatum's off the chessboard, then that's going to be a big hit to Sidney. And
there's also Richie too. You and I forgot about Richie. Randy, sorry. There's also Randy. Like Randy's also a big factor too. Randy seems to keep Billy and Stu around outside of Tatum as well, because they're all like horror geek fanatics.
Yeah.
Randy running around and like having a bunch of horror movies come to life in his dreams would be fucking hilarious. But
I could see him screaming, "This is just like in Fantastic."
I know,
just like Poltergeist.
That's the thing, though. Like, would he come too? Because he comes up with all these like crazy theories. He's the one who like announces the big rules of horror movies, right?
Right.
So let's say the Nightmare on Elm Street story doesn't necessarily exist in the Woodsboro universe. Would he be able to sit back with Sidney and be like, "Hey, all right, let's figure this out"? It seems like as if like a horror movie really is coming to life, just with us. And then also, what kind of tactics would he take? Would he be that creative? Would Stu seems to constantly be teetering, and you and I have talked about the fact that like he almost seems to be on like a attack dog. Yeah. But Billy's the one that has the chain. But what if Billy lets go of the chain because of whatever dream he has about his mom, or about his dad, or about Sidney, or about Maureen, right? Who would then hold that chain next? Would it really be Randy, or is Stu just going to be a wild ass dog running around left and right, not refusing to take commands? Or we could also flip the script, because he doesn't have like his owner barking like killed commands to him, would he run off to Randy because they seem to have a lot in common? I mean, hell, they're constantly talking unless Billy comes into the scene and it interrupts whatever kind of chemistry the two of them have. What if like Stu goes to Randy and then says, hey, like shit's tormenting me as well? Not necessarily saying that, hey, I'm at fault, because obviously Stu's going to be morally gray after killing Marine, but at the very least, he wants the nightmares to stop so he can help them. That's
something that you and I are going to talk about when we do our individual film reviews of Scream. It's just like our interpretation using context clues that Stu and Randy may have actually been probably really good friends before Billy came in. Like, so that's kind of like what Marva's hinting at. We've made comments about it, but we didn't really go too in depth when we broke down the original Scream films because we were trying to fit 3 films into one podcast. Yeah. So we'll talk about that more in the future, but that's what Marva's referencing. So I get your point on that. That could be a big thing. I kind of forgot about Randy, but Randy could almost be the anchor because he's like the middle person for the Sidney and Tatum friendship, but also for the Billy and Stu. So that could be a really big factor. Like I can, I can actually almost envision a scene in this hypothetical movie of like when Randy's putting everything together. He's just like has the group there, and he's just like, okay, this is what we know. We can't sleep. We don't know what's real, and we don't know who to trust. Follow these rules. Like I can envision that. I can see Randy, because the difference between Freddy Krueger and Ghostface is that I think Randy has obviously a sense of fear because Ghostface is real. That goes beyond evil incarnate in Michael. That goes beyond a dead corpse like Jason. So in his mind, I think that's why Randy maybe didn't come off as helpful as he did in the first 2 movies, is because of that. But if you put in someone like Freddy, who is like a fucking poltergeist / like phantasm, like I feel like Randy could really be the anchor there. Like he would come in with his horror knowledge, and then you have Stu backing him up too, you know? So because the two of them seem really knowledgeable, and same with Billy as well. But at the same time, you and I are questioning Billy's mental state, because if he's not in control of his dreams, can he be in control of himself? Like, truly? Right. That's the question right there. Regardless if they came up with the plan yet to kill their friends, they did kill Marine, so Freddy's going to be pulling that on Billy every single time, like, he's on him. You know? Like, his mother leaving, but it wasn't because of Marine. Yes. Probably he's a failure, he's a piece of shit, like, God knows what else, because we don't know Billy and Stu's life prior to the big kill of Casey and her boyfriend. Right. But we do know that Billy wasn't necessarily all of that in the very beginning. Yeah, that's true. So it seems like as if whenever he started dating Sidney, and that was in consequence of her mom fucking around with his dad, that's whenever he really came to his own. And this is such a good topic, Marva, because like I'm just envisioning like all these ideas in my head of just like, for you who don't know, there's a very famous like Freddy Krueger like pose that he does with his glove. Johnny Depp actually recreated that same I guess stroke or whatever in Black Mass, and I can like envision like Billy pinned against the wall and like Freddy with like his knife just kind of like tapping on the wall, but like they're like so close that they're like face to face, and Freddy's just tapping on the wall, screeching, telling Billy, I know your little secret. Like I can just envision I can also see him doing it with Stu too, and Stu freaking the fuck out. Right. Like this is a really cool topic, but I guess to make this short, that way we can move on to the second one. I feel like as long as the support system is there, like Marva said, I feel like they could win. I'm just not confident in saying that it's 100% guaranteed win. However, if Randy and Tatum get taken out, I'm pretty sure they're kind of doomed. Yeah. Yeah. Because regardless if Randy and Tatum don't get taken out, Billy's getting killed. For sure. I don't care what scenario, he's getting killed. Billy can easily break, and that's very apparent whenever things don't go according to plan during the final scene of Scream. Right. Like he loses control, he starts yelling at Stu. Stu almost seems like perplexed by the idea that Billy is saying and doing things that seem out of character to him, and it seems like almost this duo is attached by the hip, or at least for the last year. Right. So clearly there's a side of Billy that Stu doesn't even know. But I guess I kind of lost my point whenever I was saying this. Who knows what I was trying to get at? But essentially, like,
I found it. I guess like with Billy falling off, I don't think Stu would crumble. Even though I did call him an attack dog earlier, I feel like he still has enough foundation to where he would be able to stand on his own 2 legs. He'd circle his way back to Randy. But if Randy's gone, who would Stu turn to? Tatum. What if Tatum's gone as well? Then who would Stu turn to? Honestly, I don't think it would be Sidney. Unless the 2 of them are the last 2 people standing and they're both completely fucking tormented. But I don't see Stu coming up and creating a plan of Sidney pulling out Freddy from a dream. I'm pretty sure the 2 of them would be tormented for the rest of their lives, if not killed.
Yeah, like Billy is getting killed regardless.
Yeah.
So whenever that does happen, if Randy and Tatum are already dead too, then yes, he's just another victim.
Yeah.
Just for Stu.
Yeah.
But if Randy and Tatum are there, I can see those 3 with Sidney definitely being able to take on.
Mm-hmm.
That does kind of sound like a high, I guess, surviving count, but at the end of the day, I don't think Gail would be that important to this story.
No.
I feel like she would be around, but she would ultimately just kind of be like how you see like
just reporters on
like reporters or teachers there. Like she'll have a couple lines, maybe even like maybe her and Sidney get into a little thing still, but it's nothing like
because the book still exists. The book still exists, or at least the feature of whatever Gail wrote in the beginning movie still exists out there.
Right.
Right. No, I think it is a book.
Yeah,
it is a book.
Yeah.
So that'll be there. Clearly, Gail and Sidney are going to have an interaction. Who knows? Maybe one of Sidney's nightmares is of Gail, and vice versa. One of Gail's nightmares is of Sidney, right?
Yeah.
And like the effects the long-lasting effects that she had on Sidney's life. Who knows?
Right.
But I'm talking about the core friend group right now.
Right.
Like Dewey's also a factor. Dewey can also be there, and he also could help out. But does he have as much horror movie knowledge? We don't fucking know.
He would probably be like Nancy's dad in that movie.
Yeah.
Like he would be there and he would have a lot of lines, but he's not integral to the Freddy storyline.
Exactly. If anything, he'd be treated as comedic relief if we're keeping the same character, quirks, and all that kind of jazz whenever it comes to him. But I guess end of the line, end of the story, unless Randy were to sit down and collaborate with the rest of the remaining group, I don't think anybody would survive. And if they do, it wouldn't be a pretty survival.
I agree with you 100%. Moving on to the next point. So we wrote down the possibility of Freddy stepping into the Scream story or the Ghostface story after the first big kill of Billy and Stu. Now, this would mean that Ghostface now exists. Mm-hmm. They own the costume. Mm-hmm. They've donned the costume. Mm-hmm. Billy and Stu also have a higher kill count now.
Yep.
It's Maureen and it's now Steve and Casey. And not just that, that means the plan's in motion to kill their friends.
Yep.
So how do you feel like this goes with... I feel like it's similar to the first one. It's just...
a different variation.
The big twist is now going to be that Billy and Stu are the killers. Yeah. Like Freddy would be hanging that over like Tatum, Randy, and Sidney. But go ahead.
Yeah. So I guess one of the reasons why I didn't bring up Casey and Steve being killed in the beginning, and we only kept with Maureen's story, is because it would keep it a little bit cleaner, less chaotic. But I fucking love chaos. And I love putting order to chaos. So let's go ahead and dive into this. Stu, like how you said, Stu and Billy already have the costume. They have a plan in motion. They're getting ready to kill. Clearly, Maureen was like a personal kill for Billy. What's the next personal kill? And the duo. And
that's why you say it can be just them killing Maureen can be kind of clean cut. Yeah. That sucks to say. Like, I'm not trying to say like, oh, I condone it. Like, oh, way to go, Billy. No, it's more so like he wanted revenge. I can see it.
Yeah.
I can't relate to it, but I can see
the story's done.
I can see the vision story's done.
Exactly.
They're not going around.
Exactly.
But this time, like what Marva said, they got the itch, they got the plan. Mm-hmm. It's coming along.
Yeah. So Maureen was a personal kill for Billy. Casey and Steve clearly are a very personal kill for Stu. So it's almost like as if they're like weighing each other out.
I didn't think about that. Right?
Yeah. Stu had a part in Maureen's kill. Don't get me wrong. But he wasn't the one who I would think is delivering the final kill on Maureen.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
And obviously, or at least to my knowledge, I wouldn't think that they had the ghost face mask and suit. So clearly, again, it was a very personal kill. This, Stu and Billy are able to create that detachment towards this kill, but still keep it personal enough to satisfy whatever kind of revenge that Stu needed.
Right.
I only say that Casey and Steve are a personal kill of Stu's because fast forward to the later part of the Scream movie, you have, I forget who brings it up. I think it's Sidney who looks over at Stu and says like, hey, didn't you date Casey for a little while? And Stu's like, yeah, like only for a minute, but I dumped her. And I think Randy retaliates and says like, oh, I thought she dumped you. Somebody in the crowd says like, oh yeah, I thought she dumped you. And then Stu's like, no, I dumped her because I got something better, and pointed to Tatum. You look at Tatum and she looks like, I don't want to say off-brand because that almost seems like a jab at her, but great, not even great value either, but almost like a copy-paste version of Casey, just not Drew Barrymore.
To add on to your point, to back it up, I think Randy verbatim says, I thought she dumped you for Steve.
Yeah.
So Steve's name was thrown in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it could very well could have been a personal kill.
I feel like it's a very personal kill because, like, truly.
Is that why you're so gun ho on the fact that it was Stu that killed him, even though there's like a split between the fandom?
I think so, because I mean,
or at least Stu played a part in it.
Stu definitely played a heavy part in it. I do feel like Billy was on the phone because Casey is flirting hardcore with this version of Ghostface, and the way that Ghostface is talking is very similar to the way that Billy talks, especially whenever he's trying to seduce someone or trying to get somebody under his control. It's almost like this very like tantalizing, like I don't want to say tingling feeling because that's a little weird, but like a very like charismatic way of speaking, if you will.
Right.
And that kind of energy continues until Ghostface finally drops the line that I want to know who I'm looking at.
Right.
Not necessarily I want to know who I'm talking to. Right?
Also, you're going to love us and hate us for this. If you pay attention to the voice acting of Ghostface, voiced by Roger, he mimics the tone and personality of the people who are wearing the mask. Billy, Stu, and then so on and so forth for each film. Yeah. Now that I've told you that, go back and watch it. You're going to fucking hear it now. It's hilarious. Yeah. It's so bravo to Roger.
Like the speech patterns, the way that they talk, how they enunciate. And I can't shake this feeling because we know it's a two-part. We know it's a duo. Someone has to be on the phone and someone has to be running around and doing the killing.
Right.
How can you be on the phone and not sound breathless?
Right.
Roman is a different beast. Right? I'm going to throw Roman out of the window. Again, we're not talking about movie 3. We're talking about movie 1. So I'm going to keep most people within the Scream franchise still human, at least for the most part.
Yeah.
Because getting shot in the chest, you should stay down, but Billy still shoots back up in movie 1. But again, I digress. Going back to the whole moral of the story and about this big first kill with Casey and Steve, I feel like Billy is mainly the one on the phone because the way that this Ghostface runs, the way that he carries himself is very similar to the way that Stu carries himself, right? When he's jumping around between Sidney and Tatum as they're setting up the big party at his house, like he's following his arms around, like jumping from place to place, picks up Tatum, tosses her around, puts her back down. Like it's very chaotic. Ghostface, as he's running through the house and around the house, carries that same kind of chaotic energy.
Right.
Plus, let's fast forward a little bit. When the kids are at the fountain with Randy, Billy, Stu, Tatum, Sidney, Stu takes the time to really talk about how it's like to gut someone.
Right.
Going from stomach to sternum, letting everything spill out. So as he's talking about it, if you're thinking about it on a more psychological level, he's almost as if reliving the kill without really saying he did it, but describing it. And Billy's kills don't seem as intimate and intricate unless it's a very personal kill.
Right.
Like gutting somebody and watching the life drain from their eyes is something that a lot of serial killers get off on.
Right.
But again, you need to hold that kind of eye contact. Why isn't Billy seeming as enthusiastic about gutting somebody as Stu is? That's my question right there. But going back to the whole topic of the story, like topic of discussion, like Casey and Steve are dead, so now Freddy Krueger is another antagonist that comes into play. It's not just Ghostface, it's also Freddy Krueger. How do you tie in the two together? I would think the story would still continue with Ghostface going around and killing people in the order that he does, but the main characters, don't get any downtime. Anytime that they sleep, they're fucked around with. So then
that's crazy.
So now comes in the question, or at least this is the interpretation that I have in my mind.
No, you're fine.
Now here comes in the question, who wins this battle of who's scarier, right? you could kind of take the route of Freddy versus Jason, where Freddy seems to be feeding off the fear that Ghostface is starting.
Yeah.
And if anything, it could be an origin story for Freddy the Dream Demon, right?
Right.
Or Dream Demon. I combine the words together. Or
Dreaming.
yeah. Or you could go so far as to say that Freddy seems to be leaving Ghostface off to the side and targeting everybody else so he can feed off of this fear and then eventually go for the final kill, being Sidney. Then comes the square off between Ghostface and Freddy. Again,
Right.
Freddy can't materialize, so how can he target the killers? By going after Stu and Billy.
Right.
You can also take this whole scenario a different route. Ghostface is still killing, but because Ghostface is Billy and Stu and Freddy is targeting this friend group specifically, Ghostface starts to crumble. He starts to disapparate and disappear because Billy can't handle it and Stu can't either. It almost ties into the first point that you and I brought up. Billy's too volatile. He needs that kind of control. If his dreams aren't in control, then how can he go and kill? How can he be sound of mind? Yeah, they're cocky
Right.
and they think that they can get away with it because of all the movies that they watched and they know how to clean up evidence. But how can you clean up evidence if you can't keep track of if you're awake or if you're asleep?
I will say, though, I do agree with our first point that Billy is volatile and he will break. I do think he'll take harder to break in this movie, though.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, I almost have this vision, and I'm sorry, guys, I do this a lot. Like, Marva and I get pretty in-depth, and we kind of, like, talk about these badass moments that could happen in these hypotheticals, but I have, like, this vision of, like, so like, when Ghostface reveals himself, that's always supposed to be, like, that's who that person truly is.
Yeah.
Like, that's who Billy really is.
Yeah.
I can imagine one of the encounters with Billy. It could either be the first or it could be the last. When Billy's with Freddy in the dream world, he's in the Ghostface outfit. And I can hear, like, the banter. So, like, it's Roger's voice versus, like, Freddy England. Like, they're throwing banters towards each other. They're both killers, right? Like, doing all this, like, alpha male shit.
Almost like circling each other, getting ready to strike.
And like, they're in the boiler room. But then I can imagine where Freddy does the exact same thing I mentioned earlier. But this time, there's a cool scene where Freddy, like, teleports right in front of him, takes the mask off, and it's Billy under it, and then cowers Billy into the corner, and then again the screeching on the boiler room, like, I know your little secret, like, little stuff, like, and it's that type of stuff to where it shows that Billy, who is all about control, he controls Stu, he controls everything. In the dream world,
he can't control shit.
Yeah.
So
I can see that being, like, where Freddy really breaks him, but I do think it'll take a little bit harder because this is I don't want to say a tougher Billy, but this is a Billy with a motive, a Billy with a plan. This isn't Billy killing someone on a crime of passion because they ruined their family. Like, this is a Billy who's, like,
he's already got that first kill on. Well, technically, I guess he hasn't killed yet, right? Or at least when he's being interrogated at the police station. But he knows that he can get away with a kill that isn't so attached to him on an emotional level.
Right.
And that almost brings a sense of empowerment, at least with aspiring murderers. From all the interviews that you hear and all the crime documentaries that I sit back and watch and all the kind of shit that I've been into. That by the time you get away with the second kill, you feel like you can get away with anything.
Right.
Which is why sometimes killers become sloppy. I'm not going to say Billy becomes sloppy after that because I'm pretty I like to think that everything's all clean cut. It wasn't until Billy revealed himself and Stu revealed himself for being the Ghostface killers that people started actually seeing, like, oh, you know what? The evidence does kind of point towards them. Maybe. Yeah. Slightly. 10% chance. It's only Gail who sits back and, like, pulls these different strings together and whatever the case may be. Her investigative journalism is on another level. And it's even acknowledged in movie 6, I believe.
Yeah, like, she's very intelligent.
Yeah.
Or at least clever, cunning.
Yeah.
Do you feel like Gail and Dewey would play a bigger role in this since we are kind of following I feel like once you get Stu and Casey killed, the cops have to become more involved, right?
Yeah. I feel like they will definitely be more involved. I feel like, I don't know whether or not, like, Gail and Dewey's interactions would be as, like, intricate and intertwined. Right. I do feel like they would be targets, at least with Ghostface, and because Freddy is targeting a friend group, in turn, he's going to target Gail and Dewey.
Right.
I feel like these kind of, like, he'd probably have more eyes on them, and targeting them would be more intimate versus the first scenario that you and I ran through. But I don't think there's going to be a big showdown between Ghostface and Freddy because there's two people. Just like how you said, Freddy can easily get into Billy's mind, rip off the mask, and be like, looks like I know your secret.
Yeah.
He could do the same thing to Stu. If anything, I feel like if we're running with that scenario, Freddy would target Stu first, make him crumble. Stu runs to Billy.
Yeah.
Billy's freaking the fuck out, but at the same time trying to keep a level head because at the end of the day, they're trying to get Sidney back for everything that she did, right?
Yeah.
For whatever kind of narrative Billy has built in his mind.
Yeah,
So,
Matthew Lillard's portrayal of Stu, I can see him being like the cracked out, like almost like shaking withdrawals, kind of just like,
yeah.
like Billy, we got a problem here. You know,
Yeah.
like he can't control his dreams. He's not sleeping. Like
Mhm.
he can't continue with their plan. And then just Billy getting fucking pissed, you know,
Yeah.
that this is happening, you know? So,
Go inside, let's cue a dream right then and there, right? Billy's
Right.
losing control because like Stu can't keep himself in control. He finally falls into the dream. Freddy does the same thing. How does Billy come out? Does he crumble as well? Or does that drive him to figure out a way to get Krueger out of the picture? Will
right.
he actually sit back and collaborate with his quote-unquote worst enemy, Sidney? Or will he try and take it on himself? And because he's so egotistical at this point, Freddy gets the better of him.
Yeah.
This is where a lot of these questions come up. I still feel like Randy's going to play an intricate part and definitely like create a whole game plan for the group.
Yeah.
I feel like Tatum will also definitely be an anchor for Sidney, but because Tatum, at least in this interpretation in my mind, lasts for so long, I feel like Sidney would have a better mental foundation. So if Tatum is killed, let's say Billy and Stu are taken advantage of and are killed by Freddy, then she'll have a closer tie with Randy. And the two of them could definitely come into terms. And let's say Randy is off in this movie, I feel like, again, Sidney would have more mental stability to take this on, quote unquote, on her own, if need be.
Not just that, but in our first hypothetical, it was coming off of the murder of Maureen,
Yeah.
which people tend to forget. Freddy's always kind of around because of traumatic events,
Yeah.
like in the first movie. So that kind of makes sense. But this would be a Sidney who's like a year later.
Mhm.
It's close to the anniversary of her mother's death.
Mm-hmm.
By this point, Tatum would have already had those very deep conversations with Sidney about her mom,
Yeah.
kind of letting her know that it's not just Gail, it's everyone around town talked.
Yeah.
Like it's
a common trend.
Sidney would be coming more to terms with who her mother was.
Yeah.
So Freddy wouldn't really have that in his
Not necessarily
that
over her
advantage.
head.
Not like in the other hypothetical. But
He might drop the bomb that Billy was the one who killed her,
right.
and that could break her for sure.
Right.
Because, I mean, it breaks her nearly in movie 1 of Scream.
Yeah.
But at the same time, she quickly bounces back.
Yeah, and this isn't Sidney as broken as we mentioned in the first
Mhm.
hypothetical. So I think she would probably have better stability here, whether Randy or Tatum are around or not.
Yeah.
You know? So I think with this one, I can confidently say that I think Sidney could probably win this one, just because I feel like regardless of what happens with Billy and Stu, because I know they're going to get fucked with hard.
Yeah.
Regardless of whatever happens with them, Randy and Tatum would still be their support system until they get offed. Or at least Tatum most likely would get offed in this scenario. Because it goes back to the first hypothetical again. Freddy doesn't have that much over Sidney, so he needs to go out of his way to break her more.
Mm-hmm.
So in this one, I think Tatum would get killed.
Tatum would get killed, and I feel like Freddy would for sure expose Billy for being Ghostface.
Yes.
And for being the reason for killing Maureen. I feel like the way that Freddy would get to Tatum is by exposing Stu and saying like, "Hey,
oh, that's
you're a
right.
copycat. You're like your literal copycat of the girl that he wanted." Then that causes the divide between Stu and Tatum. Freddy could then target Stu, be like, "Look what the fuck you've done! Like you just dated the same two girls back to back. Now you're going around following this man's orders. Like, and who knows? Maybe Stu could spin off and become like a crazy ass killer on his own because Freddy's just feeding all this kind of information at him, and Stu doesn't know how to process it. Stu can also branch off into two different variables. I still feel like at the very end he'll get killed, unfortunately, but I do feel like Freddy could definitely get into Tatum's mind that way. He could even go far as to say, like, look, even Steve looks very similar to Stu, so clearly Casey wasn't even over him to begin with. It was just the fact that, like, he was a football player, he was more athletic, less likely to watch as many horror movies, because Casey, again, is a horror fan. That's why she's able to entertain with the phone call with Ghostface to begin with. Tatum doesn't really seem as big of a fan. That could be some way to feed into her insecurities as well.
I just also thought about this too, and this is specifically for this scenario just because Ghostface doesn't exist in the first hypothetical, But in this hypothetical, what's cool about this is the possibility that we could still get Ghostface kills and then not even know that it's Freddy with like materializing Ghostface in a dream.
Yeah.
And then we'll go, oh, that was a dream sequence.
Yeah.
Like, you know, that would be like, I could see like
a lot of whiplash.
Tatum still getting killed by Ghostface and then kind of like Freddy taking the mask off and like sticking his tongue out, like doing
like, this is fun.
Yeah, like some like one line, right? Because he's known for his one-liners and his comedy. So I can definitely see him doing some shit like that. And you still get the best of both worlds. You get Freddy, but you're still getting Ghostface kills, you know. I think that could be kind of cool.
Yeah, because I don't see Billy or Stu hanging up the Ghostface mask altogether.
Right.
Stu might, but I don't think Billy will. I feel like it'll be his downfall, at least in this scenario. In the first movie, like you and I both said, Ghostface doesn't exist, so there's no like alternate identity for
Billy
either
and
one of
Stu,
them to fall back on.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit more intricate and it's a little bit more personal. But this movie also, or at least the scenario, allows for different branches to break off. You could really spin the story however you want.
So do you agree that like you feel like Sidney could win this, or do you think
I feel like Sidney could win this. I don't want to put a percentage on it or like a likelihood of it, but it's definitely higher than the first scenario. I don't think she'll walk away as a full victor. There's going to be a lot of loss on her end for sure. But it's not going to be as heavy on the victim mentality. Right.
100% agree. So the last scenario that you wrote down, you want to talk about it?
Yeah. So second scenario was Freddy stepping into the story after the first big kill with Billy and Stu. Me, because I really like Wes Craven and I like his wit and his homages and even how he tends to like bash on himself in his own films, lightly, right? I thought it would be cool to kind of piggyback on the second scenario, which is Freddy gets introduced to the story while Ghostface still exists, but it's not after the big kill. It's after the janitor scene. And if you guys don't know about the janitor scene, it's whenever the principal's walking around the school, there's no kids around. He seems to almost be hunted by Ghostface, but he peeks his head out. Janitor's there. He calls out to the janitor, Krueger, the fuck are you doing here, essentially?
Yeah.
Krueger essentially calls him an asshole and walks away. But this janitor is dressed up like Freddy Krueger. The green and red sweater, the hat, and this is in the original Scream movie.
Yeah.
So what if that janitor suddenly switches over to the burned skin Krueger? And this is where the movie switches to a dream state world.
And for those of you that are kind of like, well, what's so different about this one versus the other one? I won't say it's a lot different, but here's one of the big differences. Gale and Dewey are going to for sure have a bigger role in this. Yes. In fact, I could actually see one of them getting killed just because they're so integral into this. Mm-hmm. At this point, Gale has already had her fight with Sidney. Yeah. Sidney's already been attacked.
And Dewey's also been part of the interviews at the principal's office.
Billy's already been sent to jail for one night.
Yeah.
So county. There's a lot of like stuff that's changed.
Yeah.
In this one, do you see Sidney as still like the main target of this, or do you feel like, or do you feel like it's all fair game for everyone? Everyone's equal, or do you still think Freddy would take a liking to Sidney and like kind of point her out? Because
Sidney is very much Final Girl-esque. At the end of the day, I feel like Sidney would be the.
It always comes down to her. Yeah.
Always come down to her, but I don't feel like Freddy would view the rest of the characters as side characters as much. They're going to have a bigger impact, a bigger role, right? Just like the scenario that I mentioned, or the whole interaction that I mentioned earlier. Freddy could still hold Casey over Tatum's head.
Yeah.
But because this is further down the line into the story, Tatum could have a bigger crash out.
Right.
Tatum and Sidney could then seclude themselves, create their own little friend group with Randy, while Billy and Stu are off in the corner. They already don't trust Stu because Tatum is forced to realize that Casey looks a lot like her, right? Steve also looks a lot like her. Randy never really liked Billy. He likes Stu, but he's willing to drop Stu because Stu seems to be attached to Billy by the hip. Sidney could create that distance because Stu is close to Billy, but then you also have Billy, who just recently came out of jail, and Sidney hasn't been fully convinced by her boyfriend that he's innocent yet. So it's almost like you have two different parties going on, two different main groups. How does that divide already occurred by that one interaction between Tatum and Freddy. So now it's going to be easier to pick apart.
Right.
At least in my eyes.
Sidney will be stronger in this one though, because she's already been attacked by Ghostface.
Yes.
She knows she's being singled out.
Yeah.
She knows there's more to the story about her mom now because of the phone call with Ghostface prior that night. And on top of that, again, for the same scenario from the last hypothetical, is that at this point in the story, Tatum would have already had those conversations with Sidney. So again, Freddy really doesn't have the mother thing on her anymore.
Not really.
And she already suspects that something is off with her mother's kill. So again, Freddy wouldn't really have that over her head yet either.
It wouldn't cause as big of a wave of effects.
Yeah. So Sidney would just be a lot more stable. She would probably still play victim though for a little bit, but she would still be more stable and stronger in this one. Yeah. As an example. Yeah. I feel like since at this point, by the time we see the janitor, we've already gotten whiff of the book that Gail's written. We know about Cotton Wary now. Yeah. So I can definitely see like
Cotton also having a bigger play in this movie too. Yes,
I can see Cotton being in this. I can also see Freddy fucking with Gail by kind of like him telling her like, you're willing to write a book just to put a guy who didn't even kill in jail, you know what I mean, or in prison, like really playing with her, the whole fame and fortune, you know, like
you're still willing to sell anybody's soul, right? Even a dead mother.
Yes.
Right, really guilt tripping her. Gail could also be as like almost a second final girl, if you will, in this scenario, right? Dewey's also tied into both Sidney's group, not necessarily Billy and Stu, but Sidney's group and Gail. So now it's almost like a 5 group of people against Ghostface and Freddy. And
because after the attack with Sidney, Dewey became very protective of her. So now this Dewey would be integral into the storyline now. He would be told of about Freddy. Like he would be in on the dreams now. So,
and I'm pretty sure he would have experienced a couple himself at this point because he is so closely related to Tatum. Plus, let's be real, he also acknowledges it himself. He's a bit of a laughingstock within the police department. Yeah. So playing in on those insecurities a little bit more could kind of result in Dewey not only taking himself seriously, but the situation a little bit more seriously. Right. So even though it's a small change within the storyline, I feel like it causes almost like a ripple effect within the story. I do feel like Billy again could crumble, just not as hard as the previous hypothetical and the first hypothetical that you and I talked about. I feel like he would have more reins over his mental stability, and it would take a lot for him to break. I also feel like Freddy revealing the fact that Ghostface is Stu and Billy to both Tatum and Sidney, it's going to cause a bigger effect for Tatum if she's alive at that point. But Sidney, it wouldn't be as impactful because she's constantly on guard at this point.
She would have already pinned Billy as the murderer anyways.
In one way or form.
Because again, the whole janitor scene happened after she got attacked. So, and she was quick with the draw to say that motherfucker did it. Yeah. Like that he did it. And even up until the point in the original Scream film where they had sex, she was still a little like
not 100% convinced.
Yeah, so
this would almost like set it in stone for her. Now, however, tying back into the fact that Billy and Sidney had sex, I don't know what would be that final call for Stu and Billy to take that kill for Sidney. Right? Because it seems like the two of them, while they were constantly teasing Sidney, weren't going for that full kill until she lost her virginity. But now that Sidney has completely iced out Billy and Stu, how would they justify their kill? They need to change their motive at this point. They seem to be following the same script, the same rules that Randy's following with horror movies, but now they can't follow that script anymore.
I feel like in this scenario too, that whole little, I guess, vision that I pointed out earlier of Ghostface and Freddy having that banter back and forth, pulling off the mask. I feel like that actually fits this scenario a little bit better.
More set in stone.
Because Billy is a lot tougher mentally. He just tricked the police. He got out of county. Like he is riding a high. Like you cannot touch me. I even tricked the daughter of the mother that separated my family into thinking that I'm an innocent guy. Like he's already on that high.
Innocent enough to be let out.
Innocent enough, yeah.
Now, something that I'm envisioning in my head now, I could be wrong and completely out of it. If we're really feeding into Billy being as egotistical as he is, what if he cracks the code and figures out that Freddy is a dream demon and figures out a way to put Stu into his dream, so while Freddy and Ghostface are having that final showdown, when Freddy's getting ready to fight, all of a sudden we see Ghostface split in two.
That would be sick, bro.
Yeah. I don't think Stu and Billy would fully have the upper hand on Freddy, but I think it would be an insane fight to watch. Now it's just a matter of figuring out, okay, Billy for sure is the killer. Stu is too, but who's can outwit this dream demon?
I think at this point too, that vision of like that fight that you're talking about, I do think Stu would get killed in that.
Yeah.
And Billy would probably be the one to figure out that we can hurt him if we bring him to the real world. Like he would pull off like his glove, he would pull off something, his hat. Like that would be what, you know. And then of course Billy already being the type of person he is, he really doesn't give a fuck that Stu's dead.
Yeah,
so he kind of just moves on, and then maybe through interactions. Do you think
he'd collaborate with Randy and them?
I don't think he would do it willingly. I feel like Sidney would somehow come across the information on her own.
Yeah.
But because I feel like Billy would be egotistical enough to think he can take on Freddy alone. But again, just because of certain little, like, I could see an interaction. Like, I don't see him and Sidney having sex in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
But I can definitely see an interaction happening to where Sidney on her own is smart enough to put together, like, he's being attacked by this same demon that's coming after us.
Yeah.
And that, you know, he knows a way to beat him. And then maybe she even like sees like his hat like in the drawer in Billy's house, or like just something like that. Like she sees something that just, you know.
Or hell, if anything, Freddy is able to one up Billy at some point because he gets too cocky. So then Sidney tries to figure out what the fuck happened.
That's true.
Goes in and just like how you said, stumbles across all the information, finds the hat, finds the glove, a piece of the sweater, something that indicates that he was also dreaming about the same demon that Sidney is. Because obviously, since Sidney and Tatum and Randy and everybody else have broken off from Stu and Billy, they've been talking amongst themselves about
how to deal with this, yeah.
But they don't know that Stu and Billy were also targeted by the same demon as well.
I think this is a pretty cool scenario too, because again, we'll talk about this when Marvelous and I do our full in-depth review of the first Scream film, but we're under the headcanon, specifically me, that Billy and Stu are actually more knowledgeable than Randy. So while I think in horror anyways, so while I think Randy does enough to keep Sidney, Dewey, Gale, and like Tatum alive, at least most of that group, I can see Tatum getting killed.
Mm-hmm.
Billy and Stu are the ones that are actually able to kind of like
fully put the pieces together.
Yeah, kind of like how Nancy did. And then Sidney, being the person that she is, still smart, clever, is able to kind of pick up where they left off. You know?
Yeah.
So
I feel like Randy will probably be onto something, and that's where the rest of the friend group is like, I don't know.
Yeah.
They go over to the Billy and Stu's place or stumble across whatever kind of information that Billy and Stu have, and that's whenever they get that piece of information tied into whatever Randy's saying, and they're like, all right, you know what? Maybe you're onto something. Let's keep going.
Like, I can even imagine, like, Randy probably coming up with that same idea that Billy and Stu did, just getting a horrible reaction. Like, Tatum's dead. Like, Dewey is kind of, like, still comedic, but he's obviously grieving.
Yeah.
So you kind of hear, like, Randy saying, we got to go in the dream and just pull him out. And maybe, just maybe, we can hurt him. And then Sidney's like, For Tatum, I'm down. Yeah. And then like Dewey, you want to do what? and then Gail's like, bring the fucker out here.
Yeah.
You know, like I can see like him getting mixed. So that's why they don't really do it. But then like Billy and Stu do it, and then they get confirmation, and then that's where they come up with the plan. Probably similar to Nancy, where like, Randy, you need to stay awake. You need to stay 100% awake. Drink coffee. Sleep next to me. Wake me up. Dewey, you need to have your gun, bat, whatever.
Everything.
As soon as he comes out, kill the motherfucker.
Yeah.
And then Gil, and I'll write about it. Or I'll film it. Yeah. Or some bullshit like that.
Or hell, if anything, you know what? Like, let's say this scenario, this current, like, hypothetical that you and I are talking about, Billy and Stu don't die, but they figure all this information out and they think to themselves, well, why don't we go ahead and collaborate with them? Right. What if they create a temporary alliance to get rid of Freddy? But somewhere along the lines, Billy and Stu think that they can also get away and killing Sidney in the chaos of all this. How do you think that would suffice? You
know, there's a fan theory, and I'll answer your question in a second. There's a fan theory that, and people have been saying this for a long time. Cult of Ghostface. Essentially, people want to see a shit ton of Ghostface. we kind of got it in Scream 6 with there being 3.
Mm-hmm.
And we even got the cool scene of seeing 2 attack at the same time, which that's iconic at this point. I don't like to throw that word around, but that's gonna go. That's gonna go down.
Yeah,
people are always gonna remember that.
Yeah.
How about this? I'm gonna take your vision. I'm gonna one up it. Sidney and them do the alliance. However, it's painfully obvious that they don't want to do it, but they feel like they have to. This is the greater evil. And even Dewey maybe makes a one side comment about like, you know, once this is over, you know what I mean? Like, I'm coming for you next or something, right?
Don't think it's over for you.
Yeah,
we're just trying to get this dream demon out the way.
Whenever Sidney goes under, because she's final girl, she has to.
Yeah.
When she goes under and pulls Freddy out of the dream, Freddy, I can see him on the bed. He turns around. Randy, Gail, Dewey, Billy, Stu, all 5 are wearing the Ghostface outfit. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't know who's who and under which one. Yeah. So again, Freddy, you take the control away from Freddy. Because now Freddy has to fight for his life. He's willing to kill. He doesn't know who he's killing though. Yeah. And you kind of get this. I think that'd be a dope ass scene. 100%. You know? So I think that'd be dope. But
there's a lot of ways that you could twist this like hypothetical and you could take it to another level. Plus, it's pretty easy since both of them were created by Wes Craven.
Yeah. But let us know what you think down below. Because I think ultimately in this one, regardless of how, if you have Billy and Stu getting killed like halfway through the film.
Or just one of them.
Or one of them. Or neither of them. Or if they make it all the way to the end with the main cast. I mean, I think this is a stronger unit. Yeah. I feel like they wouldn't get fucked. Besides maybe, I guess, Billy and Sidney, they wouldn't get fucked around with that hard. Mm-hmm. In this one, they wouldn't let Freddy's comments get to them and like hit the shit that he does in the dream world. But I think they could win this one. Oh.
I think they could win too. I do feel like the movie would definitely take a twist at the very end. Even though the audience member knows that this is a temporary alliance, I could easily see the movie ending with, because us as audience members, we don't know which of the 5 is Billy and Stu. Yeah. We suddenly see 2 of them raise their knives or grab their knives, but we don't know which 2. And then cut the movie, roll in Scream 2, picks back up from where it leaves, and how do the rest of the gang target these 2 original killers? Yeah.
That's also another big fan theory too. Fans, including myself, have always wanted to see a Ghostface movie end with the Ghostface still being alive, you know, so that you can kind of hit like a lot of variables in this and make it like a really memorable film. Yeah. So it sounds kind of convoluted where it has all this stuff in it, but just make it like an extra like 15 minutes and I think you're good. I think so. But yeah, let us know what you think down below about this topic, and we're probably going to cover more stuff like this in the future.
Or hell, you guys might have a different hypothetical that MJ and I haven't thought about, so let us know what you think. Definitely recommend you guys screenshotting the podcast and putting it on your story and tagging us and letting us know what you thought about this hypothetical and what kind of hypothetical you could come up with too.
100%. But since you guys have listened to this all the way through, I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys the next, I guess, cross-universe franchise that we're going to be covering, and that's going to be Supernatural and Hatchet. Yes, you heard that correctly. Supernatural and Hatchet. Could the Winchesters stop Victor Crowley? So that's going to be very fun to talk about. Mm-hmm. Oh, brother. It's going to be a doozy, man.
It is. It definitely is. I don't think Dean's going to be getting his slice of pie, at least not until the very end of the whole scenario. But it'll be interesting to see nonetheless.
We'll see what happens. But again, thank you guys for tuning in as always, and we'll talk to y'all next time.
Bye.